Guys, like, comment, subscribe, share this video, especially if you like college football as much as I do. Most specifically, Florida State football. I think Florida State's going to have a really good year. I really do. They have most of their starters coming back, and the transfer portal load that they got, woo-hoo-wee, that's going to really make their team a lot better than what it was last year. Let's start with LSU. They host LSU. Basically, it's a home game for Florida State. I know it's in Orlando, but it's basically a home game because Orlando is Florida. And Florida State's Florida. So, I don't think LSU is going to be able to block Florida State very well in this game. They had a hard time blocking FSU last year, and FSU's defensive line did have problems against teams like Wake Forest and Clemson, whose offensive lines were either really good or showed up healthy. You know, like Clemson, they were healthy in that game. They were at full power, and Florida State didn't. They had a lot of young guys in some of those games when Jared Verse couldn't go and Fabian Lovett went down. Those guys. But now that they went out and got 300-pound defensive linemen plus, I think LSU's going to have a hard time because LSU gave up 42 sacks. I know they have had a whole year to fix that offensive line. It's most of the same offensive line. But like Florida State and other teams that had a bad offensive line at one point, even if you bring back that group, it's really hard to elevate that offensive line, you know. So, with that being said, I think Florida State, I want to say dominate, but I think they'll pull away with LSU. Because last year, if you look at that game, the talent was LSU and Florida State right here. Clearly a big advantage in the talent department for LSU. But it didn't matter because you couldn't block Florida State. Now that they went out and got more players, they kept most of their starters. The recruiting class that was pretty darn good. It's more even now. So with that being said, and now it's basically a home game, I think Florida State will pull away in this game by at least 10 points or more, maybe 17 points. I don't think it'll be a blowout because it's going to be very competitive. It's a season opener. Brian Kelly's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. But again, if you can't block up front, you can't win the battle in the trenches. You usually lose the game to another opponent that's just as good as you or almost as good as you or better than you, if that makes sense. And then they host Southern Miss. They win that game, no problem. They have back-to-back away games. They had to go to Boston College. I think they beat Boston College. I think they're better than Boston College. Boston College had a bad year last year. I think they'll be a better team this year, but not enough to beat FSU. 3-0. They go to Clemson the following week. So you've had to play LSU, a loaded defense, and then you have to go to Clemson in the same month before your bye week. I think Florida State can play with Clemson. I think they can beat Clemson, but they're not winning over there. That's something they haven't done in 10 years. Heck, they haven't beat Clemson in 9 years. Well, last year's game, despite what the scoreboard said, I actually lost my bet to Uncle Lou because of this game. They could not play with Clemson last year. I think this game will be a really good football game. I think College Game Day will be there for it again. I think this will be the game of the week. But I do think Clemson wins this game at home. They have Cade Klubnik. I think he's a really good quarterback. I think Clemson's defense will be a lot better than what it was last year as far as making tackles and not giving up the big passing plays. Lower scoring game. Florida State can win this game if they play a perfect game. But it's hard to play a perfect game at Death Valley, so I think they lose that one. They have their bye week the following week, and then after they have to host Virginia Tech, Syracuse, and Duke. They should win all three of those games, no problem. Virginia Tech is in rebuild mode. They have not had a good football team in a long time. Syracuse is at home. They're a far better team than Syracuse, and they host Duke. Duke might actually be somewhat of a challenging game. Duke had 7 or 8 wins last year. They did pretty good. While I don't think they beat Florida State, I think it might be a tough game, low-key, because Duke was pretty good last year, and they have a new coach. So, with that being said, they want to win, but I think Florida State beats Duke no problem. I think they pull away late third, early fourth quarter. Then they go to Wake Forest. Wake Forest lost Sam Hartman, so therefore they shouldn't have a problem winning this game. I know it's a road game, and I know it's an ACC game, and it's a team they haven't beat since 2018, but they should beat Wake Forest. They go to Pitt. Pitt's a tough place to play, low-key. Pitt's defenses are always physical, hard-nosed, nasty, but I don't think they're talented enough to beat Florida State, let alone play with them for 4 quarters. I think they win this game no problem. Now, this Miami game at home, I know what they did to them this past year, but being realistic, Miami's one of the most talented rosters in the country. And Mario Cristobal, that was his first year. And I mean, a lot of first-year coaches, including Norvell, don't do well their first year. That's just what it is. I think Mario Cristobal is going to put Miami in the right direction. They're going to be one of the more respected teams in the country. I think they beat Miami in a thriller. Miami's loaded with talent. They still got Tyler Van Dyke. He lit up Florida State 2 years ago when he wasn't hurt and as a freshman over there. So now he's had experience playing in Tallahassee. He can win in Tallahassee, but he's not going to. So I have Florida State winning by at least a field goal or less, maybe 4 points. Then they host North Alabama. They win that game. And then they go to the Florida Gators. Florida, I think, is going to be a team that's better defensively. I don't think their offense will be great, but I do think they'll improve as a football team. I actually think Napier is not a bad coach. People make fun of him because he went for it on fourth down a lot. You got to understand something. If you're at midfield or you have a chance to get there and you're close and it's 4th and 3 or less, if you know your defense isn't very good, you should go for it, because if you get it, your offense keeps the ball, and that way you keep your defense off the field. You're eating up clock, and then you score more points that way, you can win the game. So I understand why he went for it a lot on fourth down. It won't help him. It won't matter. I think Florida State wins here. Florida State has only lost there one time in the last 10 years. One time? No, twice. 2019 and 2021. And those were bad, not very good Florida State teams. Good Florida State teams beat Florida over there. It didn't matter where this game was played. So I think they're going to be too much for, not too much. I think it'll be a good game just because it's a hate game and both teams play better. But I got Florida State winning this game by at least 17 points or less. I don't think it'd be a 20, 30 point spread. No. That puts Florida State at 11-1. They probably make it to the ACC championship game for a rematch with either Clemson. I think Miami might do something this year. Who knows? I don't think they'll be special, but they can win some games. North Carolina's out there. Who knows? So Florida State should finish 11-1. At worst case scenario, Miami might be there to pick up the bones because of the back-to-back road games at Wake and Pitt. And Pittsburgh's a physical team, so it could take a lot out of your football team even if you beat Pittsburgh. And Miami's always loaded. They'll be at home, and you know Miami wants payback for last year's game. So at worst, they could be 9-3 at worst. They could lose to LSU. LSU's loaded with players, and they could lose to Miami. Again, Miami could pick the bones. So best case 11-1, worst case 9-3. But I think the Seminoles finish 11-1.